Firstly, everyone, good morning and happy Thursday, and welcome to our webinar. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to join our debate. We hope you find it really useful. So I'm Holly Hughes, and I'm the marketing manager here at Keelover. So I will be hosting today's live debate. And there we are. So for those of you who are new to Keelover, we are a digital performance agency based in the heart of Bristol. Or as we like to say, we're a nutty but also extremely talented team of technical experts that create highly targeted digital campaigns powered by the data. So using a cutting-edge blend of human and artificial intelligence, we can do incredible things with your digital marketing to ultimately target new audiences and drive revenue growth, which is particularly important in today's competitive marketplace. And our one-of-a-kind approach makes us unique. It's also what makes us one of the UK's top fully accredited Google Premier partners. At Keelover, we also have access to teams of expert strategists, researchers, creatives, digital media buyers, and data analysts. And we like to call ourselves a group as the Audience Collective. So without further ado, let's make some introductions. So today we have the Battle of the Experts. So in the red corner, we have Martin the Adman Hughes, head of PPC. And in the green corner, we have Sam, the data wizard Jones, head of SEO. So over to you first, Martin, if you could just briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Holly. Yes, hi, I'm Martin Hughes. I'm the head of the PPC side of things at Keelover. I've been in digital marketing for about 10, 11 years now. So obviously seen a huge amount of change in that time. I started off doing SEO and PPC. And then back in 2013, 2014, wherever it was, when Google dropped the Panda and Penguin update and obliterated 90% of SEO work, I picked my side and headed into the zone of the PPC manager. And that's where I sit now.
Perfect. Sam, what about you?
Well, I'm going to start, firing punches a bit early. When he said he picked the side, he picked the easy side, basically.
Okay.
But I've been in digital for like 12 years, pretty much always on the SEO side. I've also gone through all of the obliterations of penguins and pandas and whatever Google decides it's doing this week. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, today we'll be taking a deep dive into pay-per-click and search engine optimization strategies, so that hopefully you can come away with some tips, tricks, and tactics that will help you maximize return on investment from your online marketing spend. And as we go through the topics of debate, if you do have any questions, just drop them either in the chat or the Q&A box, and then we'll circle back around at the end to answer them. Okay, perfect. So let the battle commence. Round one, return on investment. Martin, over to you.
Okay, cool. So this is a kind of two-pronged answer, really. PPC is amazing for fast and easily quantifiable ROI. One of the beauties of AdWords and the various other platforms is great reporting on what you're spending, what revenue you're generating. And of course, if you're working on a kind of time sensitive element where you need campaigns to deliver revenue and customers for your business very quickly, PPC can be up and live and running extremely quickly. And of course, you're very much in control of how PPC performs for you. If you want to spend £100 a day and you need to achieve £1,000 a day in revenue, you can structure and manage the campaigns to deliver that. And if they're not delivering that, you either change them, pause them, or look at a different platform. So for me, PPC will always win out on the ROI side because it is super, super measurable and you're in control. But that's my case on that side.
Sam, what have you got to say on the ROI?
Unfortunately, I have to concede the speed point. SEO is a little bit slower to get going, but it's also using very data-led strategies. The difference is you can't pivot as quickly, which is kind of the thing Martin's getting at. It's very easy to pivot with your kind of ROI on SEO, on PPC, but with SEO, you're putting strategies into place, actioning them, building up that ROI over time. The real difference is, and where SEO obviously wins hands down, is that we're building higher ROI over time because we're always capitalizing on the previous quarter's strategies and gains, refining that process by analyzing the data, and then building on top of what you've done before. And that's kind of where we get a bit of an edge is PPC, not necessarily flat, you're still improving your ROI over time, but you're not just kind of compound growth along as you implement more strategies, more content, and work with more data, essentially.
So that is an interesting argument, because I think you do find with Google campaigns, Bing campaigns, and so forth, eventually you can optimize to kind of peak efficiency, where you hit a really fantastic level of return on investment, hopefully, or a really, really low cost per acquisition on lead generation campaigns. And then they kind of just plateau slightly. Performance is still great, but they do plateau. And then ultimately then it becomes a more rounded project about actually improving your website to gain that extra 10 or 15% of performance, you know, again, that can keep things moving along. Whereas SEO is more of a slow burner, should we say. So.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we're typically looking at, 6 to 12 months to get tangible ROI going, but then once you've done that, you're then building on that. Obviously, it can be a lot quicker. Sometimes you get hold of a site and you're like, I can fix these 5 things and I'm going to sail, but more commonly it's a slow roll.
Do you think it might be fair to say then, short and medium term, PPC would win hands down on ROI?
Yeah.
Long term, a draw?
To draw? No. I'll give you the quick bit, but when it comes to long term, no, we're going to get more traffic, more opportunity.
But Sam, can I ask? So with SEO, if you stop the momentum, or if you stop the optimization with it, what happens to the ROI then?
So it's an interesting question because it kind of depends on the market. If you're in a really uncompetitive market, there's not many people doing any active SEO or marketing in your sector, you can do an SEO campaign for 12 months or a year and you'll have quite a good sticking time from that. But more realistically, more commonly what we see is when you stop actively, it's basically active marketing. It's a bit like it just starts to slowly decline, because obviously if you've stopped but your competitors carry on, even if you had an advantage, they're going to close that gap over time.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is always make sure there's a small amount of budget for SEO.
Small? No, giant.
Well, a large one. Okay, let's move on to brand 2. So predictability and forecasting.
Sam, why don't you go? Sam can go first on this one.
We'll take it.
Sam can go first on this one.
I mean, this is a bit of a hard one for me, actually, because the hardest thing about SEO is actually the predictability and forecasting. Because obviously Google's algorithm that it uses to determine where a site sits in any search result for any term isn't public. We know most of the factors, but the actual way everything is weighted within that algorithm is not public information. And because of that, it's quite hard to predict the exact impact of your strategy. So we've got best practices, best guidelines, but the actual reality of it is in order to fully understand exactly the impact of, let's say, optimizing a piece of content on your site, in order to exactly measure that, you'd have to be able to measure your site against all of the other sites that are competing for that term, against all of the variables in the algorithm, and then you'd be able to make an absolutely scientific, this will result in this. the reality is that's not possible. And even if all of the information was public, the amount of data analysis you would have to do to get that result, it wouldn't be worth doing. However, if you follow best practice, it is very, very rare that you don't see incremental growth. And we can very accurately predict things like if you're appearing at a certain position on a page, how much traffic you'll get based on search volume. So we can do a lot of good stuff around predictability and forecasting, but we are slightly hamstrung compared to PPC, which basically, I think I just made your argument for you. Should we move on? I mean,
it was a very eloquent explanation, so I do appreciate that. Yeah, PPC kind of does win this one hands down, because there's a beautiful level of reporting that's provided to advertisers. And for us, it's very much based on the maths. You know, how much are our clicks costing? How much is our daily budget? What is the general site conversion rate? And then all the maths is just calculated from that. And it's incredibly powerful, really, to be able to present that data and analyze that data. And you can put forecast models together that are by and large extremely accurate. We're in control, really, of how it performs. And of course, you know, you generally the first couple of weeks, a month maybe, is data gathering, analyzing website performance. But of course, then we have all that wonderful data, and we can make changes very, very quickly that we're in complete control of. So, yeah.
And I mean, just to kind of follow on from that is a massive difference. So obviously, we have, from SEO side, we set expectations, which we base, you know, internally, we base those off previous performance. So we'd expect a 12-month campaign, you know, whole year campaign, to be generating 10 to 25% traffic growth. But obviously, there's so many variables. Where did your traffic start? What keywords are you targeting? That our modeling is effective, but nowhere near as accurate, is the problem.
Yes. Yeah, and one thing to consider as well, of course, is that there are fluctuations in PPC. If you suddenly increase your budget significantly, the law of averages state that actually your cost per acquisition may go up. You know, if you're enjoying a steady cost per acquisition or cost per sale at the moment, you suddenly throw in an extra 15-20% budget, there will be a momentary rise in those costs until the algorithm, if you're using AI-led campaigns or manually led campaigns, bring it back down through optimization. So it's always something to consider.
I mean, and that's kind of where we join up really well, actually, is because actually both sides are all using data. They're both using historical data to drive forecasting and predictability. It's just the way we use it, isn't it?
My God, we're in agreement. Okay, right, fine.
Oh God, yeah, we've done this wrong.
Okay, all right, cool.
Let's move on. So speed. How fast do you need a return? Martin, you start with this one.
Yeah, so again, AdWords, Bing, social campaigns have a massive advantage here. You can be, as long as your creative approach is sorted, ready to rock and roll, you can be live within a week, generating traffic within a week, and generating sales and customers within a week. And of course, the reporting, as I mentioned on the sort of previous point, we can immediately gauge effectiveness and then start working around that to generate the return that the clients need. So yeah, I mean, I think as far as speed goes, if you're a client that needs quick impact through your activity, then you would have to start with PPC. There would be no other option, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really argue this one. Like, I can't turn on an SEO tab. I think the difference is, like, SEO is always going to have to start with obviously most traditional PPC, you're literally choosing keywords based on volumes and stuff. With SEO, you're doing a lot more in-depth market analysis, competitor research. You're having to benchmark your site before you can actually really have a strategy that you know that you can put weight behind and will work. So I can't really go any quicker than having to do that work, unfortunately. Yeah, that unfortunately takes months, but then we do get better compounding of that over time. It's again that we get to win the long game.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, that's always up for debate, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, I mean, even PPC is never guaranteed to make a fast return, you know, because you can launch, various elements may not be correct, or the market may suddenly be terribly competitive, or as we found, especially over the last 15 months or what feels like 15 years with COVID, markets just collapsed overnight, and channel performance just collapsed overnight. So, you know, there's a lot of work that does go into that.
I mean, that feeds really well into something you and I have obviously talked about loads, which is the, you know, when we analysed last year, the difference between multi-channel clients and single channel clients.
Yeah.
And that's not just SEO versus PPC, but the companies that were in multiple digital marketing spheres had a much more robust year.
Yes, it's a very good point. Single channel advertisers suddenly found life a lot harder when the demand dropped. So
yeah, and that's also part of, I mean, you know, this question aside, but that's also one of the other things where, you know, if in PPC, if a couple more players enter the market like they did last year, that can start pushing your numbers differently. Whereas if you're already in the lead in SEO, anyone coming into that market is still miles behind you.
yes, yeah, it's a safety net, as it were. Yeah.
Round 4 then, so targeting and traffic. I guess this is pretty self-explanatory, but Sam, if we start with you.
Oh, excellent. So this is a really interesting one, because obviously in a lot of ways, PPC and SEO are using the same data sets, because we're both using mainly Google's data sets. So the key difference is we actually get to target larger volumes of effective traffic. So PPC tends to target different stages of the funnel, whereas good SEO targets all stages of the funnel. So it's building, you know, awareness, building engagement, building in communities and all of those kind of stuff. So we get to target much broader levels of traffic that a PPC campaign could target, but it wouldn't actually be effective. Whereas that softer stuff that we target with SEO helps drive leads into businesses. And building a bigger, we basically get to target slightly more of the overall market in terms of a particular industry, sector, niche, whatever.
Yeah.
And then actually, in terms of traffic volumes, Martin and I were having a great debate about this morning. We actually get to target more actual traffic, because PPC will only capture, what were we saying, 15%, was it, Martin?
15 to 20%, yeah.
15 to 20% of the actual search traffic that is available for a keyword. The top spot in actual organic listings gets 28 to 31% of all of the clicks, which means that though PPC is quick and easy, you're actually getting better and higher volume traffic, because despite all of Google's efforts to rearrange pages, people still have the habit of going to the top organic listings. So that actually means we get a larger market share.
There is an element of truth to that, yes. With Google Ads in particular, you can target very broad research-related terms, and, you know, people who are not necessarily very far down the buying cycle. You know, they may have seen something that's prompted them to start researching on Google. And if you have significant budgets, that's great. You can target those users as long as you're prepared for a lower level of return. But the vast majority of PPC clients actually need to see a profitable level of return. So you would generally build out your AdWords traffic and other such platforms around buying terms and keywords. Or, of course, if you're using shopping ads, which are incredibly effective, you would potentially even only use shopping ads if you're very, very ROI focused. But yeah, Sam is absolutely right. SEO, in terms of traffic, gives you a very, very broad opportunity. You can't choose the type of traffic, which some may say is a negative. However, with Google, you can choose the type of traffic, and it's really your AdWords managers and your PPC managers' job to ensure that the traffic is of the best quality. But in terms of volume, ultimately in the long run, SEO is probably a tiny little bit better.
I've got to come back on that one, because whilst Martin's slightly correct in that you can't laser focus your traffic in the same way, we obviously are still doing targeting. So the way we'd structure sites and pages is to have, you know, content for each stage of the funnel, whether that's the product page that you're actually completing the sale in, or the lead, or that's the more top of the funnel stuff. But as Martin's saying, in some sectors that traffic is slightly less effective traffic. It is the softer traffic. So it's important to rank for it, because it's still engaging people, getting people up to understand your products, services, or whatever. But yeah, it's not converting at the same thing. It's not giving you that ROI. It's more allowing SEO and your website to target a much broader spectrum of the market and engage people on more levels.
I think I just saw an interesting question come through regarding brand and awareness campaigns, I believe. So to address that, yeah, I mean, it's brand and awareness is obviously a key element of the cycle. Most advertisers work on a kind of awareness, consideration, purchase funnel. You know, there's multiple touch points and stages within that journey. So awareness, I would generally always steer people to the social media platforms where their audiences are far more likely to be spending time, and where you can build engagement and then build out new audiences from those engagement, which obviously then moves people into consideration stage, or hopefully straight into conversion stage. Yeah, brand and awareness activity. Google can be effective, but it can also be expensive. I find from my experience, you get a lot more bang for your buck using social media platforms. Broadly speaking, the clicks are still considerably cheaper, and the audience targeting is significantly better. Although, just to caveat that, how Facebook is now starting to be affected by this iOS update is significant, and we're seeing major differences in reporting over the last 2 weeks since it came into effect. So it's a really good question that would probably be worth a follow-up chat, actually, if possible.
I think to add to that as well, it's from an SEO perspective as well. Brand building SEO kind of comes more like link building and PR, because it's more about getting your mentions and stuff on other sites that have got bigger audiences, and then feeding that traffic so that you build essentially your brand search over time. It's very different kind of strategy that we use, but it's very different because you're really focusing on getting your name out in other places. But it's really it's not to say it's the most effective, because compared to traditional SEO, it's less effective in terms of traffic volumes. But in some industries where it's either micro focused or it's highly competitive, it can be the only viable alternative to traditional SEO. So it's still important to consider.
Yeah. Do you think especially on like a B2B level?
Quite often on like the B2B level or something, yeah.
Sam, have you found, I mean, without sort of narrowing in this too far, but are there, from an SEO standpoint, are there any particular industries where you've had great success stories, and why have they worked so well with SEO strategies?
I mean, there are lots. I've been doing this for 12 years. I hope I've had some successes. But in all honesty, it depends. Like the best stuff is normally stuff where, I mean, historically, it's undeveloped markets where there's not many people in the marketing sphere, but there's high traffic volumes. They're always great. I mean, we've worked with some kind of construction type companies where actually we've managed to build out massive campaigns for them at very low cost for acquisition for them, with high volume products. We've also had great success even in some of the more traditional but very competitive niches, and that's always been about careful targeting. So carefully choosing keywords that can be ranked for, that will deliver, you know, sales, particularly in like fashion and that kind of sector where it's highly competitive. And with there, it's as much a marketing as an SEO exercise. It's about making sure you've got the correct position to go in, you know, marketing position to go into that sector with.
Okay, let's move on to additional benefits. Who wants to start on this?
I'll let Martin take this one.
Oh, so again, it kind of references to something we just touched upon, brand exposure. Because you're at the top of the page, it's super, super important to be at the top of the page now. Organic listings are getting pushed further and further down in huge number of commercial categories. And of course, effectively, you generate immediate volumes of traffic, and that can be analyzed to improve website performance. And again, given the privacy things that are coming in, website performance now is going to be absolutely crucial to the success of all paid media, whether it be social, whether it be traditional AdWords, Bing, and so forth. So it buys you lots of wonderful data that you can then analyze and use to give to the dev team to start improving your website. But that's kind of about it, I think.
I mean, it's great for me because basically what he's saying is I'm going to give you a load of data that you can use to improve the website. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Because one of the things, like the most important thing about SEO is that even though it's this, like everyone thinks of it as this activity to push you up the SERPs, give you higher rankings, give you more traffic, the fundamental core of SEO is all of the precepts that Google's pushing for us. Is about making a better web experience, better digital experience. It's about improving the quality of our websites, the quality of our content, how users interact with those sites. So basically, everything we do in SEO is about making your website better, more engaging, more useful, and giving you ultimately the leads or sales you need. And obviously, because that's what we're doing, it actually gives you better ROI from all channels. So from PPC, from any paid activity, social, whatever you're doing online, email marketing, that's all getting pushed to your website, and SEO is about making that website the best it can be. Sorry, Martin.
I was just about to say, yeah, I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, it's absolutely right. SEO has evolved a huge amount over the last 7-8 years. And a vast percentage of the work now is technical, about improving the site and making the site is as Google friendly as possible. I've seen multiple projects now, where improving the technical SEO aspects of a website have improved my campaign's PPC performance. So there is some really good synergy there. Yeah. And it's the same with social media. If you're putting really good high quality content on there that boosts the SEO, it's also great for social traffic to go on there. So, yeah. But yeah, there you go. I'm kind of just making your point here, but yeah.
It's fine, mate. I'll just sit back.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay. Right. Cool.
So, judge's verdict. So we've heard both of your sides of the stories now, and there are values and benefits to both. But can you give me a quick summary?
Okay, so with PPC activity, and I'm particularly thinking the more commercial PPC activity, it's immediate returns.
Yeah.
It literally is. You spend £10, you make £50, you make £100, and that is measurable impact and forecasting ability from day one, which for advertisers, with budgets that need to be tightly controlled and tightly monitored, that is priceless effectively. And one of the key elements with PPC and what makes it the dominant platform or the dominant channel use, I should say, is customer control. You as advertisers and ourselves as agencies control how it works. We control what we spend. We potentially control what you guys make. And we can control how everything develops. Google don't change a whole lot about how PPC works, other than the advancements in AI, which are wonderful now. If you'd have gone back to AI controlled campaigns 2 years ago, not good. Now, generally fantastic and spectacular, which means your team becomes strategists, and then that's always about discussing with you your returns and what impact we're having and how we adapt those campaigns. and things like that. So to me, it's the control element. It's a fantastic ability to control the impact it has on your business day by day.
Easily quantifiable.
There you go. Yeah.
Sam, over to you.
Yeah, mine's kind of, you know, it is a much more long game. It's about getting that cumulative long-term growth. You know, if you can build 10 to 20% growth in traffic in your business every year, and you're building on top of what you've done last year, the more you stick with it, you know, the longer you go with a good SEO campaign, the higher your returns get over time. And that is, it's kind of the Achilles heel of SEO as well, because obviously, you know, at the end of the day, everyone's got to make business decisions. So it can be quite hard getting over that first hump, but once you do, you're going to get a much higher return over time. And I don't think PPC can do that.
I mean, you know, that's the crux of the matter, isn't it? And that's the question that's always difficult to provide a definitive answer on, just much to the annoyance of advertisers. Is because PPC can be incredibly effective if it's done well, and it's the agency in question is working very closely with the business they're looking after. SEO requires that patience, and given the things that have been going on over the last year and a half, it's hard to you know, give that commitment, isn't it, in a way?
And as Martin rightly points out as well, the PPC landscape does not change a lot. You know, the advancements are like you get new ad types and you get new creatives to play. With our side, Google changes things. They're looking to improve the actual search experience, and that can mean quite, you know, massive changes. As we said straight away, like Martin and I were there for Penguin and Panda, which they were updates about making the web better, but they destroyed a lot of SEO strategies. Thankfully, we've moved into a world where good SEO is fairly self-evident, because it's about good user experience, good on page, good this. So it's less likely to change in a radical way, but it's still Google's pushing out updates on a regular basis that we have to adapt to. But again, that's where it comes into being a good thing for us. We're just trying to improve every aspect of a site's performance.
And that's the key. So Holly, how do you declare some sort of winner, or is it an honourable draw at the end of that?
I mean, depends what you want, but in terms of good time to jump into questions, actually, because we have someone here asking, what metrics, KPIs do you recommend to measure ROI for SEO?
I mean, we've got essentially baseline, it's always going to be your sales metrics, so your sales or your leads. But in terms of tracking progress, the key metrics, it's always ranking growth and traffic growth. What we want to see is that steady growth in traffic compared year on year. Month-on-month data is pretty much useless in every industry. What you want to see is, where are we benchmark against this same point last year? Because that's giving you a realistic conception of how your progress is coming on. And again, extending the time frames, it's the same with rankings. If you look at your rankings on a weekly basis, which some people are obsessed with doing, you'll see them just doing this all the time, because Google's, you know, working out where things go, changing things based on performance. It's not a very accurate way. Again, we're looking for these long-term graphs. So if you look at a 6-month period, what you want to see is stuff starting to creep up, some stuff going up to page 1, some stuff climbing up, and some things will go down. So you want this overall trend. Those are the kind of key KPIs we'd be looking at.
So another question here, which is actually a good one. So I have a new business, someone's saying, so just built an e-commerce website in WordPress. Very little effort done for SEO, but it rates okay. Should you invest in PPC or SEO to begin with?
I would hand this one to Martin and say, what I would probably do, it depends on the competitors of your market, but what I would probably do is get some baseline technical work done on the website if none's been done, so that you know that it's up to performance scratch, and then hand over to Martin and let him feed in traffic to
Yeah, it's one of those e-commerce ones are always slightly more challenging from an SEO perspective, because as I'm sure you'll see, that Amazon and John Lewis and eBay tend to dominate the top of the page for huge volumes of product related searches. So PPC does give you an opportunity to compete. I'd probably advise start with shopping ads. So just make sure that you've got a good quality product feed set up and linked into a Google Merchant Center, and then you can compete at the top of the page straight away.
And then when that's all working really well and delivering you good ROI, that's when you can revisit more extensive SEO work.
Yeah.
So that you can start planning out content and ways to access new markets. That's the kind of best. I mean, essentially, Martin and I are saying the ideal is always to use both of us, because they do work really well together.
So I got another question here, which has been submitted on email. So many companies have large marketing budgets for search, and it is difficult for a smaller organization to get any traction. So with a limited budget, which is the best method to use? They haven't quantified the type of business, but with a small budget, where would you recommend someone start?
Sam, if I go first on this.
Yeah, okay.
That's the challenge for all advertisers. It depends really on a load of factors. If you're kind of a local business looking to compete on a local and regional level, there's always a good SEO opportunity on a sort of local and regional level. Sam, you like the local campaigns, don't you? It's very easy to do sort of geographic campaigns.
Yeah, very cost effective.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and then they're not particularly budget intensive. If you're trying to compete nationally with national companies, you're going to need relatively deep pockets from a PPC perspective and an SEO perspective, unless you sell something or you offer a service that's relatively niche. And then it's really about doing some research about where your audience are. Google might not be the right way to go, simply because it's too damn expensive. However, there might be some very good social media audiences that you can target in on that are much more cost effective and increase brand awareness and drive traffic to your website that way, or even generate leads directly through the platforms. So yeah, that's quite a difficult one.
Yeah, from an SEO perspective, it goes back to something I touched upon earlier. I would look at the market, do the competitor research, and work out a way to bring someone to market. And that wouldn't matter whether that was on PPC or SEO or social. I'd want to get that data analyzed first, because as Mike says, if you're going to push yourself up against John Lewis or something, and you don't have a way to differentiate yourself in that market, you're not selling luxury tie-dye jeans or whatever, something very specific that we can build a brand around, which would work for SEO and PPC, then you need to look at the other alternatives, so social or other channels as well.
I think one of the key questions always, no matter which kind of advertising medium or search medium you're looking at, is why will somebody buy from you? If you're selling product, you need something to stand out, and challengingly for most retailers, that means you need to kind of run offers and things like that, or you need a real niche or exclusive product to kind of get some cut through with audiences. It's always ask yourself, why will they buy from me? If you're selling something that everybody else is, why will they buy from you?
From an SEO perspective, we can do some other slightly, which we've done previously a few times, which we can also explore things like affiliate marketing, because what we can also do is leverage networks of existing sites and stuff to sell your products for you, and they obviously take a commission. But that can also be really effective route to market for some businesses, because essentially what we're doing is kind of traditional outreach and product placement and stuff, but with companies that will feature your products and then essentially sell them for you. That can also be a good way to access harder markets.
So that kind of leads nicely on to the next question, really, which is, regardless of method, do you think Google has too much power? Yes, there is Bing, but Google has the market. So give me your thoughts on Bing for audiences, effectiveness, etc.
I like Bing. Yeah, Bing's like, you know, Google's little underappreciated cousin. You can get some good performance out of Bing's audience tends to be a slightly older demographic, but by that very nature, they tend to have slightly more disposable income.
Mhm.
So if you are selling something that is targeted at, say, the over 35s, over 40s, maybe slightly more of a considered purchase, Bing's a very viable option.
The downside is it's only got 9% of the market, 10.
10,
I think it's 10. Yeah, it's a really small percentage of the market. As Martin said, it's great for capturing certain audiences, and it's, you know, we want a site to rank on both, but the difference from an SEO perspective in what you do to optimize it is very minimal. There are a few things that Google threw out years ago that Bing still uses, and that's about, you know, meta keywords and things like that, which we don't really ever intentionally optimize for because it's a small section of the market. But if you rank well in Google, you tend to rank well in Bing as well. So
I've got another question here, which is interesting.
Cool.
So are there any golden rules for your first pay-per-click campaign? Someone says, our site is currently undergoing SEO improvements. So would it be best to wait until the site is SEO friendly?
So one golden rule is don't use broad match keywords. They will spend a lot of money very quickly. I suppose it would depend on the nature of the SEO improvements. A golden rule is just zero in on the right search terms. Use the tools in Google. There's a keyword tool that can give you tons of great data. It's there in the AdWords interface under the tools section, of course. That's really useful. And build carefully structured keyword lists. Use exact match a lot. They're not really exact match anymore. They're called exactish match. And they'll pick up variances on your primary keywords and build out campaigns that are based around your website. So if you have category pages, have category campaigns, and keep the keywords focused. You can expand your keyword sets as you go if you find you're not getting enough traffic. But if you go too broad straight away, you will waste a lot of money, and it can leave a little bit of a bad taste, unfortunately.
So when it comes to setting up, so if someone started a new business, someone's asking here, would a small budget do any good, say £50 per month? Or sort of what would you suggest is a minimum amount to get any traction?
Minimum for AdWords really needs to be quite a bit higher than that, I'm afraid. £50 a month equates to really just over £1 a day, you know, £1.50 a day, something like that. That won't really get you any traction. To give you an idea, if you were, I don't know, selling insurance or something like that, or you were a local solicitor, you'd be up around the sort of £6 to £10 per click mark. So you'd only get a click. You'd only get about 1 or 2 clicks a week. It's not enough. You ideally need to run at least £10 per day as a minimum on Google Ads, and anything less than that is just ineffective, I'm afraid.
I mean, from your experience, Martin, if you run £10 a day, your ad in most verticals, your ad's not running all day. You're
yeah, it is limited, and it is challenging for smaller advertisers. It's amplified, especially over the last 15 months, with lots of new advertisers coming into the field. Of course, there's lots of traditional retailers and events companies have very much moved online and pushed, you know, much higher budgets online and so forth. So it's one of those. It's worth having a chat to somebody. But if somebody says they can do AdWords and they will get you a result for £50 a month, I would run. That's just not going to work.
Same with SEO.
Yeah. It's just not going to work, I'm afraid. Yeah.
I got one final question, which is quite simple question really for Martin. So in the world of PPC, is shopping worth considering?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, definitely. Google Shopping is really powerful. The clicks are significantly cheaper than text ads, and the conversion rates are comparable. So they're a very effective way of advertising you need to be careful with them slightly. Lots of retailers have reasonably large product sets, and there'll be varying profit margins, but if you divide the campaigns up and don't spend too much money on the cheaper items and focus on the more high value, high margin items, you should be able to see a lot of success. You know, even a fairly average shopping campaign should deliver a return of about 5 to 1. And you know, a good shopping campaign should be up around 800 plus. So shopping's well worth it. Shopping on social media as well can be very effective, because of course you can upload your products to Facebook, and especially if you've got a Shopify site, you know, it all just loads straight in there. It's really, really cool. So yeah, shopping and product ads are very useful. You just need to be careful that you're not advertising too many low value products, because then generating a return on them is difficult. Yeah, it's a challenge.
And in terms of as a sort of a new business, a startup, looking at budgeting, would you suggest, someone's asking here, would you suggest to amount a percentage of the sales forecast to PPC? How would you suggest they budget it in the forecasting?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a tricky one to answer without having some context with it. I mean, I'll give you an idea. I looked after for several years a Tuscan villa company who spent around 33% of their annual revenue on marketing. That was their marketing budget. Most companies tend to operate on a sort of 10 to 15% of turnover for their marketing budget. You don't necessarily need to allocate all of that into Google. I think the key, if you're a new business and you're looking to try AdWords, is speak to somebody, find out really what you need to spend on a minimum level that's going to generate a return. Try and go a little bit higher than that if you can, and then get those campaigns up and running, because it'll quickly become clear if the campaign's going to deliver, how the website performs, and then you can quickly make changes as well to optimize and try and increase that return. And then you'll get a much clearer idea of what you guys are going to need to spend to be competitive and actually deliver for yourselves.
Yeah. And I guess it's all about identifying the target market, because when we talk about PPC, it's not just Google. We've got YouTube ads, Spotify, TikTok, and it's really sort of identifying where your audience is at to spend accurately. Absolutely.
Yeah, we always kind of default to Google because it's where the active searchers are. But if you're trying to launch a brand, social media and whichever platforms are where your audiences are will always be the best bet. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that is all of the questions answered, I think. Let me just check. Yep. Okay. So, well, everyone, thanks so much for joining. I hope you found it useful. But just before we let you go, just want to say don't miss our next webinar, which is Wednesday, the 26th of May. We touched upon this a little bit earlier, but this is going to be talking about a hot topic. Everyone's talking about it right now. It's quite a concern, which is how to protect your digital marketing strategies from the impacts of a cookieless world. So Martin, you'll be guiding the audience through that. There's a lot to talk about. People are a bit afraid of what's to come.
Yeah, that's good. That's going to be an interesting one, because that's literally developing almost day by day about how all the tech giants are going to respond to this. Yeah.
Because I think I read a statistic that traditional digital marketing strategies could be 80% less effective when Google takes out the third-party cookie.
Just paid advertising, SEO. We're safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't get any traffic anyway. So no, yeah, there's a lot of fear out there. A lot of agencies are not quite at the jumping out the window stage, but it is concerning. So we're trying to work out how it's going to all impact us.
Yeah, I think the thing we're saying to clients and customers, be proactive rather than reactive as much as we can with this one. But I mean, And also, if anyone's got any further questions, feel free to sort of drop either of us an email and we'll get back to you personally. And for all of those who joined today, you'll get a link to the next webinar in sort of a follow-up, so you can log on there. But thanks both, it's been great.
Thank you.
Cheers.
No worries.
I hope everyone's enjoyed, and see you next time.
Thanks very much, guys.